If you dare to explore the darkest mysteries, subscribe now to Whispers in the Dark. Activate notifications and be prepared to hear whispers that may haunt you even in the silence of the night. Real stories, mysterious events, and spine-chilling tales. But beware, fear will always be your companion here. Click the subscribe button before it's too late. Impersonation and hacking. I guess I should start by saying that I've never been the kind of person who attracts drama online. My name's Megan, and at the time this happened, I was 28, working as a graphic designer for a small marketing agency. My life was pretty routine. Wake up, work, scroll through socials, repeat. Facebook was my main platform since I used it to keep in touch with old college friends and distant family. Nothing fancy, no scandals. That's what made this whole thing even weirder. It was a random Wednesday evening in March. I remember because I was binge-watching The Office for the umpteenth time while lazily scrolling through Facebook. A notification popped up. "Megan, people are reacting to your post." I frowned. I hadn't posted anything. Curiosity took over, and I clicked. To my surprise, it was a photo of me, a picture I hadn't posted, but it looked exactly like something I would have. A goofy selfie in my kitchen, holding my morning coffee, captioned, "Morning Fuel #blessed." At first, I thought it was a glitch, like maybe Facebook was recycling an old post. But as I scrolled, my confusion turned into genuine concern. The profile wasn't mine. It was a duplicate. My name, my photos, everything. Even the profile picture was a shot I'd taken just last week on a hike. For a second, I even laughed nervously, thinking it was some bizarre fan or scammer who hadn't put much effort into being original. But the eeriness set in when I noticed something unsettling. The account was actively posting things I had said that same day, in real time. For example, earlier that afternoon, I'd messaged my best friend, Jamie, about meeting up for coffee. That exact message, word for word, was on their profile as a public status update. My skin prickled. I called Jamie immediately, and she answered, sounding just as confused. Megan, what's going on? I just got a friend request from you." I felt my stomach drop. "Jamie, don't accept it," I said quickly, my voice shaky. "That's not me. Someone's impersonating me." She hesitated, probably trying to process how this was even possible. "Okay, but how would they know what you said to me earlier?" That was the question haunting me too. I tried to play it off like it was a coincidence, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Whoever this was, they weren't just stealing my photos. They were somehow inside my messages. I reported the fake account to Facebook and spent the next hour obsessively combing through my own profile, changing my passwords, and enabling two-factor authentication. I felt a little better afterward, convincing myself that I'd taken control of the situation. But that relief was short-lived. Around midnight, as I was lying in bed, my phone buzzed. It was Jamie again, but this time she sounded panicked. "Megan, your account just sent me a message." I shot upright. "What? No, that's not possible. I haven't messaged anyone tonight." But Jamie was adamant. "It's your profile. It even has our chat history. Look, I'll screenshot it and send it to you." Seconds later, her text came through, and I stared at the screen in disbelief. It was my account all right, my name, my picture, but the message wasn't from me. It said, "It's me, Megan. Meet me at our usual coffee spot tomorrow at 3. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. This was beyond weird. I hadn't typed that. I couldn't tell if it was a sick prank or something darker, but I knew one thing. Whoever was doing this wasn't just impersonating me anymore. They were actively pretending to be me. I stayed awake the rest of the night, refreshing my account and watching for any other strange activity. At some point, Exhaustion got the better of me, and I must have dozed off. The next morning, I woke up with a start, my phone buzzing incessantly. My notifications were flooded. Comments, tags, messages. My account had been hacked. My profile picture was gone, replaced with a distorted, nightmarish version of my face. It looked like someone had run my photo through one of those creepy glitch filters. My eyes were warped, my smile stretched unnaturally wide, and the caption read, "Who's the real Megan?" Panic set in. I opened the account settings, but every attempt to log in failed. The hacker had changed everything. Password, email, recovery questions. It was like I didn't exist anymore. Worse, the posts from me were escalating. One was a blurry photo of my bedroom window, taken from outside. Another was a status update that read, "She doesn't know I'm watching." I froze, staring at the screen as my hands went cold. I called Jamie, my voice trembling as I explained everything. "Jamie, they've taken over my account. They're posting things about me, things they shouldn't know." I didn't even realize I was pacing until I tripped over the edge of the rug. Jamie's voice was firm but scared. "You need to call the police, Megan. This isn't just some internet creep anymore." She was right, but I hesitated. What would I even say? "Hi, officer. Someone's pretending to be me on Facebook and posting pictures of my house?" It sounded ridiculous, but the truth was, I didn't feel safe anymore. I double-checked all the locks on my doors and windows and called my building's landlord to ask about the security cameras outside. My gut told me this wasn't just online anymore. This was personal. By the time I worked up the courage to call the police, it was early afternoon. I gave them the rundown, emphasizing the creepy posts and the photo of my window. The officer on the phone was polite but cautious, probably thinking I was exaggerating. "Ma'am, it's likely a hacker trying to scare you. Still, we'll send someone by to take a report." I hung up feeling both relieved and frustrated. I wasn't sure what I expected. An immediate SWAT team to burst through my door? While waiting, I kept refreshing the hacked profile from Jamie's phone, which she'd let me use to monitor the account. A new post appeared. It was another distorted image. This time, it showed my front door. The caption, "Let's play a game." My stomach churned. I ran to the door and checked the peephole, half expecting to see someone standing there, but the hallway was empty. I felt trapped, like my own home wasn't safe anymore. When the officer arrived, I felt a flicker of hope. He listened patiently, but I could tell he wasn't taking it as seriously as I needed him to. "It's probably someone you know, trying to mess with you," he said. "We'll file a report, but you should reach out to Facebook directly about getting your account back." His words felt like a brush-off, but I nodded, not wanting to seem ungrateful. As he left, I noticed something on the floor just outside my door, a small envelope. I hadn't seen it earlier, and it wasn't there the last time I checked the peephole. Inside was a single photo of me, sitting on my couch, scrolling on my phone. My phone slipped from my hand, hitting the floor with a thud. Someone had been inside my apartment. My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, clutching the photo with trembling hands. I scanned the room, my eyes darting to every shadow, every corner. Had they left something behind? Were they still here? The idea sent a shiver down my spine. I grabbed a kitchen knife, feeling ridiculous but too scared to care. My first instinct was to call the officer back, but what could I say? "Hey, they left a creepy photo?" Instead, I called Jamie again. She answered on the first ring. "Jamie, they've been here," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "They left a photo of me inside my apartment." Jamie gasped, her voice cracking with fear. "Megan, you need to leave. Pack a bag and come stay with me now. Don't even think about staying there tonight." She was right. I couldn't sleep another night in this place. Not after this. I packed quickly, shoving essentials into a backpack, and booked a rideshare to Jamie's apartment across town. As I waited for the car, I tried not to look at my phone. The hacked account was still active, and I didn't want to know what else I was posting. The car arrived, and I bolted downstairs, double-checking the hallway for anyone lurking. When I got to Jamie's place, the safety of her warmly lit apartment was a temporary comfort. She poured me a glass of wine, and we talked about what had happened. As the night wore on, she tried to make me laugh, distracting me from the terror of the last 24 hours. I even started to feel like I could breathe again, until her phone buzzed. A notification from Facebook. My hacked account had just posted a live video. The thumbnail? A view from Jamie's balcony. Both of us froze, staring at her phone like it was a ticking bomb. Jamie slowly picked it up and opened the live video. The screen filled with a grainy, shaky image of her balcony door, illuminated by the faint glow of the city outside. My stomach turned. Whoever was doing this wasn't just taunting me anymore. They were here. "Turn off the lights," I whispered urgently, and Jamie scrambled to shut them off as I pulled the curtains closed. We huddled in the dark, barely breathing, waiting for something, anything, to happen. The live video continued, but now it was panning across the balcony. Suddenly, there was a loud thud outside, like someone had dropped something heavy. Jamie grabbed her phone and called 911, her voice frantic as she explained the situation. I stayed glued to the screen, watching the video feed. Whoever was filming had stopped moving. The camera now pointed directly at the balcony door, as if waiting for us to make the next move. The police arrived within minutes, pounding on the front door and announcing themselves. Jamie and I practically ran to let them in. They swept the apartment and balcony, but whoever had been there was gone. The live video had ended just moments before they arrived. The only evidence left behind was a single object on the balcony floor. My old keychain, the one I thought I'd lost months ago. After that night, I deleted all my social media accounts. Facebook never responded to my requests for help, and my old profile was eventually removed, but not before it had posted one final message. Game over. I moved to a new apartment and even changed my phone number, trying to erase any trace of my old online life. To this day, I don't know who did it or how they got so deep into my personal world. All I know is that I still feel like I'm being watched, even in the safest of places. Unwanted visitor. I can't believe I'm even writing this, but it's been weighing on me for weeks now. It started out so normal. Just one of those random friend requests on Facebook. You know, the kind you accept because they have mutual friends, and it doesn't seem weird at first. His name was Ethan, and he said he went to a school about 15 minutes from mine. We had a couple of people in common, so I figured, why not? We exchanged a few casual messages over the next week, mostly about school, teachers, and random stuff like movies we liked. He seemed normal. I wouldn't say I was super interested or anything, but he was friendly enough. It wasn't until one Friday night that things got weird. I was home alone. My parents had gone out for dinner, and my little brother was at a friend's house. I was in my room scrolling on my phone when the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it might be a delivery or maybe my parents forgetting their key. But when I looked through the peephole, I froze. It was Ethan. I hadn't told him where I lived, let alone invited him over. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding in my chest. My first thought was that maybe this was some insane coincidence, like he was just in the neighborhood. But then he rang the bell again, longer this time, and knocked right after, hard and impatient. That's when I knew something wasn't right. I tried to calm myself, but every possible explanation I came up with felt flimsy. I hadn't even mentioned the name of my street to him, let alone my exact address. After a few minutes of silence, I thought he'd left, but then I heard it. The sound of footsteps moving around the side of the house. My stomach dropped. I ran to the window in the living room, careful not to be seen, and peeked through the blinds. He was standing there in my backyard, looking straight at the sliding glass door. He wasn't knocking anymore, just standing there, staring. The porch light caught his face, and something about his expression made my skin crawl. He didn't look angry or upset, just blank. I ducked down, my hand shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone. I didn't want to take my eyes off him, but I knew I had to call someone. My parents weren't answering, so I dialed 911. Whispering into the phone, I told the dispatcher what was happening. She asked if I was alone and told me to lock myself in a room until the police arrived. The whole time, I could hear his footsteps on the deck, pacing slowly back and forth. Then, there was a loud thud. I jumped and nearly screamed. He had thrown something at the sliding door, a rock or maybe his fist, I couldn't tell, but it didn't break. Instead, he leaned in closer, pressing his face against the glass. I could see his breath fogging it up, and that's when I realized he was smiling. It wasn't a friendly smile either, it was twisted, almost like he was enjoying how scared I was. I crawled into the hallway and locked myself in the bathroom, praying the police would get there in time. Sitting in the bathroom with my back against the door, I could barely hear anything over my own heartbeat. Every little creak in the house made me jump. Then I heard something that turned my stomach, the sound of the back door handle jiggling. He was trying to get in. I clenched the phone in my hand, whispering updates to the dispatcher. She kept telling me to stay calm, but that was impossible. I was shaking so hard I thought I might pass out. A minute later, it got worse. I heard glass shattering. My mind went blank as I realized he'd broken a window. He was inside. The dispatcher told me the officers were close, but that didn't matter in the moment. I could hear him walking through the house, his steps slow and deliberate, like he was in no rush. The worst part? He was humming. It was some tune I didn't recognize, but the sound of it made my skin crawl. He wasn't yelling or threatening, just wandering around my house. Humming like this was all a game to him. I held my breath, trying to stay as silent as possible. My mind was racing. What if he found me before the police arrived? My bathroom door didn't even have a proper lock, just one of those little push-button ones that anyone could pop open with a pin. I was trying to keep still, but the floor creaked under me, and I froze. The humming stopped. My stomach turned as I realized he must have heard it. Then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps heading toward the bathroom. Each step felt like a hammer to my chest. He was getting closer. I pressed myself harder against the door, clutching a pair of scissors I'd grabbed from the counter. It was all I had. The handle of the door jiggled, and my heart felt like it was going to explode. "I know you're in there," he said, his voice low but steady. It was the first time I'd heard him speak. I could barely breathe as he knocked on the door, 3 sharp taps, like he wasn't in a hurry. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My whole body was locked up in fear, like even the smallest sound would make him burst through the door. He jiggled the handle again, harder this time. Then came a sharp scrape, like he was trying to pick the lock. I whispered into the phone, barely able to get the words out. "He's at the door." The dispatcher told me to stay quiet. The officers were just a few streets away. But it felt like forever. And then, suddenly, he stopped. No more scraping, no more knocking. I couldn't hear his footsteps anymore either. For a second, I thought maybe he'd left, but that didn't feel right. It was too quiet. I sat there, straining to hear anything, and then it hit me. What if he was waiting, just outside the door? My brain was screaming at me to run, but I didn't know where to go. The silence stretched on, So long it felt like hours, and then I heard it. The sound of sirens, faint but getting closer. The sirens were like a lifeline, but I didn't let myself relax. What if he tried something before they got here? I pressed my ear against the bathroom door, trying to pick up any sound. That's when I heard it. The faintest creak of a floorboard, followed by hurried footsteps heading toward the back of the house. He was leaving. I stayed frozen in place, barely daring to breathe as the footsteps faded, and then I heard a loud knock at the front door. "Police!" someone shouted. I didn't move right away. I was too scared it might be a trick. I whispered to the dispatcher, who confirmed the officers were there and it was safe to come out. My legs felt like jelly as I unlocked the bathroom door and slowly made my way to the front. 2 officers were standing there, their faces serious. One of them asked if I was okay, while the other headed inside to search the house. They didn't find him. He was gone. Even with the police there, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still nearby, watching. They found the broken window in the kitchen and muddy footprints leading through the house, but they ended abruptly at the back door. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. The officers stayed with me until my parents got home, but no one could explain how he'd known where I lived, or why he showed up at all. I deleted my Facebook account that night, but it didn't make me feel safer. For days, I kept thinking I saw someone lurking outside my window or a shadow moving in the corner of my eye. The police never caught him, and no one named Ethan went to the school he claimed. To this day, I have no idea who he really was or how he found me. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear that humming, faint and distant, like it's waiting for me to notice. Neighborhood intruder. I'll never forget the day it happened. My wife, Emily, and I had been living in this house for 3 years, a modest but cozy place at the edge of the woods. It's one of those neighborhoods where people are quick to chat about minor dramas, missing packages, stray cats, and the occasional bear sighting. We were scrolling through our local Facebook group one Friday evening, winding down after dinner, when a post caught our eye. Anyone else see the guy wandering near the woods behind Maple Street? Kinda creepy. There were pictures attached, grainy, zoomed-in shots of a man in a hoodie standing near the tree line. The comments exploded with speculation. Most people joked it off, but a few mentioned hearing noises outside their homes at night. Emily nudged me, half joking, "Hope he's not scoping us out." The thought lingered more than I'd like to admit. The next morning, as I went to take out the trash, I couldn't help but glance at the woods behind our backyard. There was nothing unusual at first, just the same dense trees and underbrush that framed our property. But as I stood there, I noticed something odd, a trail of snapped branches and flattened grass leading deeper into the woods. It was subtle, almost easy to overlook, but it was there. I told myself it was probably a deer or maybe kids playing, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. That evening, we saw another post in the group. This time, someone claimed they'd seen the man walking up a driveway a few blocks away. Called the cops, but he was gone before they got here, the post read. Emily and I exchanged worried looks. Something about it felt too close for comfort. By Sunday, the tension was thick. We hadn't seen or heard anything ourselves, but every time I stepped outside, I felt like I was being watched. Emily tried to brush it off, saying it was probably some drifter passing through, but I could tell she was on edge too. That afternoon, we decided to check the woods behind our house, just to ease our nerves. Armed with a flashlight and my old baseball bat, more for my peace of mind than anything else, we made our way past the backyard fence and into the tree line. The woods were eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes every rustle of leaves sound louder than it should. About 10 minutes in, we found something that stopped us both in our tracks. Tucked into a small clearing was a pile of trash, empty food wrappers, a few crushed cans, and a filthy sleeping bag. Emily grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "What the hell is this?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. It was clear someone had been living there, and recently too. My stomach churned as I imagined the man from the Facebook posts sleeping so close to our home. We hurried back to the house, locking every door and window behind us. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind against the siding, sent my heart racing. The next morning, I woke up groggy and irritable. Emily had left for work early, and I spent most of the day trying to shake off the unease from the night before. I told myself it was overreacting. We didn't see anyone, and maybe the campsite had been abandoned. Still, I couldn't resist checking the backyard again. As I stepped out, something immediately caught my eye. The shed door, which I distinctly remembered closing and locking after mowing the lawn last week, was slightly ajar. A cold wave of dread washed over me. I stood there frozen for a moment, my mind racing. It could have been the wind, I told myself, though deep down, I knew better. Gripping the bat I'd left by the back door, I slowly approached the shed. Each step felt heavier than the last, the crunch of gravel under my shoes loud in the still air. When I reached the door, I took a deep breath and nudged it open with the bat. The first thing that hit me was the smell, a rancid mix of sweat and something metallic, like old blood. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, and that's when I saw him. Crouched in the corner, his face partially hidden by the hood of a tattered sweatshirt, was the man from the photos. His eyes met mine, wild, sunken, and bloodshot. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he lunged. Instinct took over. I swung the bat as hard as I could, not aiming to hit him but to create distance. He stumbled back, slamming into the wall of the shed with a grunt, but didn't fall. My heart was pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. I bolted out of the shed, slamming the door shut behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I struggled to slide the latch into place. From inside, I could hear him pounding against the walls, shouting something incoherent, his voice guttural and panicked. I ran back to the house, locking the door behind me, and grabbed my phone. My fingers fumbled as I dialed 911. When the operator answered, I could barely get the words out. "There's a man in my shed. He tried to attack me. Please send someone quickly." The dispatcher's calm voice felt surreal against the chaos swirling in my mind. She assured me officers were on their way and told me to stay inside. I kept my eyes glued to the shed from the kitchen window, half expecting him to burst out at any moment. Emily called just then, and when I told her what was happening, her voice cracked with fear. "Lock yourself in the bedroom," she said. "Don't go near the windows." The wait for the police felt like an eternity. Every second stretched out, my mind spiraling with worst-case scenarios. What if he got out? What if he had a weapon? The pounding on the shed door had stopped, but that almost made it worse. I couldn't tell if he was still inside or if he'd found another way out. I sat on the floor of the bedroom, the bat clenched tightly in my hands, listening for any sound that might signal his next move. Finally, I heard the faint whoop of sirens in the distance. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. From my vantage point, I saw the shed door swing open just as the flashing blue and red lights appeared at the end of the street. He darted out, sprinting toward the woods like a cornered animal. My stomach dropped. I thought he'd get away. But then, 2 officers bolted after him, their shouts echoing through the yard. I couldn't see what happened next. They disappeared into the thick tree line. For a moment, the night was still again, except for my ragged breathing and the hum of the police radio outside. It wasn't long before one of the officers emerged from the woods, holding the man in a firm grip. His hands were cuffed behind his back, and his face was streaked with dirt and sweat. He looked even more unhinged up close, his hoodie torn, eyes darting wildly like a trapped animal. The second officer walked behind them, holding what looked like a rusted hunting knife in a plastic evidence bag. My stomach turned. He'd been armed the whole time. The officers stayed to take my statement, asking questions about when I first noticed the shed and if I'd ever seen him in the area before. As I recounted everything, my voice trembled, and I felt like I was watching someone else's life play out. Emily came home halfway through, rushing to my side and gripping my arm so tightly it hurt. When I asked the officers who the man was or why he might have been there, they exchanged a glance before one of them answered. "We're still figuring that out. He's refusing to talk, but based on what we found in his camp, he's been living back there for weeks." That sent a shiver down my spine. Weeks. After the officers left, the house felt eerily quiet, like it was holding its breath. Emily and I sat on the couch, neither of us saying much. Every so often, one of us would glance at the backyard as if expecting him to somehow reappear. I couldn't shake the thought of him being out there for so long, watching us, hearing our conversations, knowing our routines. The knife haunted me too. What had he planned to do with it? That night, I double-checked every lock and even shoved a chair under the doorknob of the shed, though the police had assured me it was secure. Sleep didn't come easy. Every shadow seemed to shift, every creak felt like a footstep. Over the next few days, we learned bits and pieces from the Facebook group and a follow-up from the police. The man had a history of mental illness and homelessness. He'd been seen wandering several neighborhoods, but ours was the first where he'd been bold or desperate enough to hide so close to a home. They said it was unlikely he'd return, but that did little to ease my mind. We installed a security system the next day, complete with motion sensors and cameras. For weeks after, I'd still find myself looking out the window at the shed, half expecting to see him standing there. Life has mostly gone back to normal, but sometimes, late at night, when the woods are especially quiet, I catch myself listening, just in case. Obsessive neighbor. I moved into this apartment about 6 months ago, hoping for a fresh start. It's a small place, but cozy enough, and I like the idea of being on my own for the first time in years. I didn't know many people in the building, just the usual polite nods in the hallway or at the mailboxes. So when I got a Facebook friend request from someone named Tim, it took me a second to realize his profile picture matched the guy who lived next door. I hadn't even spoken to him yet, but I figured he was just being friendly. I accepted, not thinking much of it at the time. That was my first mistake. At first, his messages were harmless. Things like, "Hey, welcome to the building, and if you need anything, let me know." I replied politely, but I didn't go out of my way to engage with him. Then his messages started to get weird. He'd comment on things I posted, even old pictures, saying stuff like, "You looked beautiful here," or "Wish I could have been there to keep you company." I'd barely posted anything since I moved, but somehow he knew when I came and went. He once messaged me, "Late night tonight, huh?" after I got back from a friend's birthday party around 11 p.m. That's when I realized he must have been watching me. After that, I started feeling uneasy every time I left my apartment. I'd glance at his door, wondering if he was behind it, watching through the peephole. His messages became more frequent, several times a day, and the tone got creepier. He'd say things like, "You're too pretty to be alone," or "You should let me come over and keep you safe." I stopped replying altogether, thinking he'd lose interest if I ignored him. Instead, it made things worse. One night, he messaged, "I hear you moving around in there. Why don't you answer me?" That's when I started locking the deadbolt even when I was home, something I never bothered with before. The final straw came last Friday. I was watching TV when I heard a knock on my door. It wasn't a friendly knock, it was loud and insistent, like someone was trying to get my attention. I froze, not wanting to make a sound, hoping whoever it was would go away. Then I heard his voice. "I know you're in there," he said. his tone sharp and demanding. "Why are you ignoring me? Open the door." My heart was racing, and I grabbed my phone to call the building manager, but before I could dial, he started pounding on the door, harder this time. "Let me in, damn it," he shouted, and that's when I realized he wasn't going to leave on his own. I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life. I stayed frozen on the couch, trying to keep my breathing quiet, but the pounding got louder. It felt like he was going to break the door down. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely dial 911. When the operator answered, I whispered what was happening, begging them to send someone quickly. I remember them telling me to stay calm, but how do you stay calm when someone is trying to force their way into your home? As I was on the phone, I heard him jiggling the doorknob. Then came a sound that made my blood run cold, the unmistakable scrape of a key in the lock. I thought for sure that was it. My mind raced, trying to figure out how he had a key. Did he steal it from the landlord? Had he been inside my apartment before? The door didn't open, though. I'd bolted the deadbolt, thank God, and it was holding. He let out this frustrated growl, like an animal, and started yelling. "You're making me do this. I just want to talk." He kicked the door hard, and I could see it shaking in the frame. I kept whispering to the operator, asking how much longer. She assured me the police were on their way, but every second felt like an hour. The banging suddenly stopped, and for a moment, the silence was worse. I was terrified he'd found another way in, maybe through a window or the fire escape. I crept toward the peephole to see what he was doing, but I couldn't see him. Then, I heard shuffling noises near my door, like he was crouched down, maybe trying to pick the lock. I started backing away when he spoke again, this time calmer but even more unsettling. "You don't have to be scared of me," he said softly. "I just want to see you. Why are you being so difficult?" His tone sent a shiver down my spine. He was trying to sound reasonable, but it only made him seem more unhinged. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I heard the faint sound of sirens. Relief washed over me, but I was still scared he'd do something desperate before they arrived. I stayed as far from the door as possible, clutching a kitchen knife I'd grabbed earlier. The sirens got louder, and then there was banging on the front door to the building, louder than his had been. He must have heard it too, because he suddenly went quiet. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps running down the hallway. I didn't dare look until the police knocked on my door and identified themselves. Even then, I had to fight the urge to stay locked inside. When I opened the door for the police, I could barely speak. My hands were trembling, and all I could do was point down the hallway where he had run. They went after him, and a few minutes later, I heard the commotion as they tackled him near the stairwell. His screams were chilling. He kept yelling, "She's lying." I just wanted to talk, over and over again, like he couldn't understand why this was happening. I stood in my doorway, frozen, watching as they hauled him out in handcuffs. He turned his head toward me as they passed and gave me this look that I'll never forget. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was this twisted mixture of betrayal and obsession, like I was the one who had wronged him. The officers stayed for a while after that, asking me questions and reassuring me that he wouldn't be coming back. They found a copy of my apartment key in his pocket, but no one could figure out how he'd gotten it. The building manager swore he hadn't given it out, and my original spare was still where I'd left it in a drawer. That part still keeps me up at night, knowing he had access to my apartment all along and could have come in whenever he wanted. I've since changed all my locks and installed extra security, but I still jump at every unexpected noise. He's in jail now, but I can't shake the feeling that he'll find a way back. That's the worst part. I don't think I'll ever feel safe here again.